All right. Hello, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're very excited to welcome Chris, the director of the Montezuma Audubon Center, back tonight to tell us a little bit more about Montezuma and the birds that inhabit it. We're very lucky to have him for the second time in a week span. His presentation last Wednesday, if you were here, was fantastic. So I am very excited for this one as well. The webinar will be recorded, and we will be taking any questions in a Q&A at the end. So we can get started.
Thanks, Kelly, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone, to the Montezuma Audubon Center's virtual birding tour. I am Chris Lajewski, Center Director of Montezuma Audubon Center. Going to take you on a experience this evening, which will hopefully inspire you to visit the Montezuma Audubon Center and the broader Montezuma Wetlands complex at some point, hopefully very soon. It has been a very birdy winter. I don't have to tell you how mild it has been. That has led to bird sightings that we typically don't see or experience during the winter season at Montezuma. Our snow geese had never left. Our Canada geese are still around. We're in the broader Finger Lakes region, not necessarily Montezuma, but just at the south end of Cayuga Lake. We've seen birds that typically don't migrate up into our area until March. Those are species like killdeer, gray catbird. Some of the other waterfowl are still in the area as well. So I'm going to take you on a hour-long excursion through the Montezuma Wetlands complex. We're going to do some paddling first through our marshes and open waters like the rivers and streams that flow through Montezuma. Then we're going to get out of our boats and we're going to take a little stroll around the grasslands, make it our way into our forested habitat, and then wrap it all up with another short kayaking excursion through the swamps of the Montezuma Wetlands complex. And I think by the time that we are done exploring the Montezuma Wetlands complex together, you will begin to see just how important this huge Montezuma Wetlands complex is for birds or the wildlife, as well as, though, for the enjoyment of people. So first, though, a little bit about the National Audubon Society, which is the organization that I work for. And the National Audubon Society has been in existence since 1905. And our mission is to protect birds and the places that they need today and tomorrow. We do that through conservation, education, science, and advocacy programs and activities all across the Western Hemisphere. Speaking of the Western Hemisphere, we now have a hemispheric approach to bird conservation. When National Audubon Society started, way back in 1905 in New York City, and I'm using my red pointer right now. Hopefully you can see that on this map here. So when we started, we were protecting small acreage of forests and wetland habitats, primarily along the East Coast. And as the organization grew, our conservation efforts grew, but it was primarily across the lower 48 United States. And as science evolved and our knowledge of birds and what they need in order to survive changed with the science, we came to understand that we can't just conserve habitats for birds in the lower 48 states. We need to have now a hemispheric approach, or an approach where we are protecting birds across their entire life cycle. Some of the birds I'm going to be introducing you to today are still down in South America. They could be in Peru, northern Chile, Brazil, or some are even down in the Argentina area, a good 4,000 miles to the south of us here in upstate New York. So we have to protect birds and their wintering grounds for certain in South America. But of course, as you probably know, birds migrate and they are just about ready to start that long, arduous journey to their breeding grounds. So they're going to be leaving the South America area, coming up to the Caribbean islands. Some are going to make their way up through Central America, through Mexico. And so they are going to be stopping along the way. We need also to protect these critically important stopover sites for birds. Imagine you taking a long journey somewhere, you're driving somewhere, or you're in a bus somewhere, and you're going on a long trip, 2, 3, 4 day journey. Well, you're likely making multiple stops along the way to refuel the vehicle, refuel yourself, have something to drink, hopefully something healthy. Birds are going to be drinking water along the way, and you're also going to be resting. So maybe staying in a hotel or motel or friends or family home, you have shelter. Birds also need that shelter during this migration. Critically important to have stopover habitat for birds as well. Now, of course, we're protecting breeding habitat for some of our birds right here in the lower 48 states, but some go even further north, another 2,000 to 3,000 miles north of upstate New York. So birds might be up in Hudson Bay area or the boreal forest of central Canada or the Arctic tundra, closer to northern Canada and the shores of Greenland for breeding. So we're protecting habitat also in these northern areas where some birds are going to breed. That's what I mean when we have a hemispheric approach to bird conservation and protecting birds across their entire life cycle. Now then, let's bring it closer to home. And the Montezuma Wetlands Complex is, you might be familiar with the term Montezuma, but where exactly is this? I just want to orient us now as before we get into the boats and begin the excursion together. So Montezuma Wetlands Complex is right here at the north end of Cayuga Lake. Just to orient you, here is Cayuga Lake, the longest of the Finger Lakes, about 40 miles long. Ithaca is at the south end, town of Seneca Falls, and the Montezuma Wetlands Complex at the north end. We have Syracuse, about a 45-minute drive to the east. Another 45-minute drive to the west is Rochester, and about an hour drive south is Ithaca. Now here is a bird's eye view of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. This is actually an aerial view of an area called Howland's Island, and we're looking southbound. You can see the Erie Canal snake its way right on through here. You can see actually the main pool area of the National Wildlife Refuge right about in here. And you can see Cayuga Lake right down here. So we're looking southbound. And I see Colleen has her hand raised. I'm wondering, Colleen, if you have a question or if you're not seeing my red pointer at all, and that's why you're raising your hand. I just want to stop for a moment. Maybe she can enter a question into chat. And hopefully Kelly can help with that process.
Yeah, any questions we can put in, there is a Q&A that you can click onto, and you can type any question that you might have.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that my friend there who was raising her hand, okay, there is a question.
She's good. She was just had an audio issue, but she is good to go.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I want to make sure we're all on the same page and everyone is getting the full experience of Montezuma virtually. Okay, so here we are again, and using my red pointer here. So I just wanted to show this because this really highlights and is a good view of the major habitat types that we have across the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. You've got upland forest. Obviously, we're talking about heavily forested areas with trees. So places like right up in here, upland areas, a lot of red oaks and white oaks, hickories, both shagbark hickory and butternut hickory trees. Ash trees are still in the area, although quickly dying off, unfortunately, because of emerald ash borer, that invasive insect. And we also have marsh habitats. So you're going to look to riverside areas, stream edges, lake edges, habitats like right down in here. It would be a marsh habitat, so that's a wetland with low growing vegetation, not trees. We also have swamp habitats, which are wetlands with trees. Grassland habitats, so these are areas that are filled with native grasses, native wildflowers, no shrubs, no trees, so really low vegetation in a drier setting. And I mentioned the Erie Canal prior. Erie Canal, which is also known as the Seneca River, flows through the Montezuma Wetlands complex right in through like this. The Clyde River also flows through the wetlands complex. And then lastly, agriculture. Agriculture is here. You got a couple of areas in the foreground here and here. Corn, soybean, winter wheat are the dominant crops that farmers plant within the Montezuma Wetlands complex. And while they don't provide much habitat for birds during the growing season, so everything from May right on through September, the wintering habitat or winter time of year, these agricultural areas can flood if they are near one of our larger bodies of water, and that will provide habitat for birds as they're migrating northward, especially those waterfowl, those geese and ducks and swans that migrate through. There's maybe a foot or so of water on those agricultural areas, and there's a really good chance that there's the corn and the soybean waste grain from last year's crop that wasn't harvested by the farmers that those waterfowl will eat in those flooded out ag areas. Now, here's another view of Montezuma, although in map form, and wanted to orient you here first. So here's the thruway, this red line coming right through here. So this is where you're passing through the Montezuma Wetlands complex on the thruway going 65 miles an hour. You may have done this in the past. And that big bald eagle sculpture, just to orient you, is right about here on the south side of the thruway. So when you're traveling the thruway through Montezuma, you're going through a very small sliver of the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. And the National Wildlife Refuge is about 10,000 acres of your land. As taxpayers in this country, congratulations, you own that land. That is federal government, and that's your land right there. So 10,000 acres of the National Wildlife Refuge, mostly along and adjacent to the thruway, and also routes 5 and 20 in Seneca Falls here. This is the north end of Cayuga Lake and the town of Seneca Falls right there. Now, north of the National Wildlife Refuge, in this area, slightly different shade of green, that is also your land. That is owned by New York and managed by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So again, that's your land. And there's about 9,000 acres of that property, including the Montezuma Audubon Center. And we're right up here on Route 89 in Savannah, just a short 15-minute drive north of the National Wildlife Refuge. The Refuge Visitor Center is right here on 5 and 20. And the Audubon Center, Route 89 Savannah, is located right here. We sit on 200 acres of land, and we have 2 miles of trails. And we are open all year long from sunrise to sunset. Trails are open sunrise to sunset all year long. If you want to come inside the building, we are open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4 all year long. And so doing the math, you probably did that much quicker than I did and could figure out that that's not quite 50,000 acres, just shy of 20,000 acres actually, which is correct. So most of this, what we say is the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, is privately owned land because the Montezuma Wetlands Complex is 50,000 acres total, mostly private, good chunk of public land, your land there. The government agencies, nonprofits like Audubon do not dictate what happens on private land. As long as they're obeying local, state, federal laws, folks can do whatever they want on that land. But if they want assistance from Audubon, DEC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and getting help to manage their land or advice on how to manage their land, we are certainly more than willing to do that and go and get on the ground with those folks, see the acreage on the ground, and help the landowner understand it and manage it in a way that's good for the landowner, but also in a way that's good for birds and other wildlife. Across this whole wetlands complex on all the public land, you got 25 miles of designated hiking trails, 8 canoe and kayak boat launch locations. A couple of those are motorboat launch locations as well. I mentioned the 2 visitor centers, the Audubon Center and the Refuge Visitor Center. Now, little point here, little note, the National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center is closed during the winter months. They close December 1st and reopen on or around mid-March. Sometimes it's delayed just based on volunteer support that they have and staffing. But usually mid-March, the Refuge Visitor Center reopens. The Wildlife Drive, which is that 3-mile long driving auto tour that you can take on your own, will not open again until April 1st. And that is every year, regardless of whether it's just too complicated and they don't have the staffing to open it and then close it if it snows and open it. And so it's just closed from December 1st until April 1st. Now, that being said, there are so many other areas that you can go and explore on your own on beautiful days like today. Tomorrow's going to be beautiful. 60 degrees is coming on Wednesday, so birds are going to be flocking in here to this Montezuma Wetlands Complex, and you can explore other areas of the National Wildlife Refuge, and certainly a lot to explore up by the Audubon Center in Savannah on the DEC properties. All right, that being said, now hopefully you are oriented to this Montezuma Wetlands Complex, and I'm sure that we have some visitors here tonight that are from the Albany area. Maybe some folks are downstate. Maybe there's Buffalo in the house and Rochester and Syracuse. Hopefully got some Finger Lakes folks with us. So again, hopefully this encourages you to come visit us from wherever you happen to be. But we're going to hop in our kayaks right now and start by paddling through some of our marsh habitats. So these are areas with low-growing vegetation. Think of cattails and other low-growing vegetation adjacent to our lakes. This is Crusoe Lake here that we're starting to paddle through. We also have some areas that are like the Seneca River and the Clyde River. The north end of Cayuga Lake is also great for paddling, especially during the warmer months. So I've got some, whoops, I pressed the wrong button there. Let me try that again. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of my pointer. That's what I was trying to do. I don't want to use my pointer anymore. Okay. So hopefully you're just seeing that one cool image of a pterodactyl. No, it's not a pterodactyl. That's great blue heron. And we have a rookery of great blue herons at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. It's in the adjacent to the Clyde River there. So we've got some wonderful habitat there, and they're typically seen foraging for fish and other aquatic organisms in these marsh habitats and riverside ecosystems. Beautiful bird. They typically migrate south for the winter. However, if they have access to open water or non-frozen water, liquid water, then they do stay up in New York State. But most of them do travel southward just because liquid water is really limited over the most of New York State during the winter months. Now, I've got bird calls and songs to play to go along with the images that I'm showing you here today. So again, this is great blue heron, and I'm going to start off by playing that call for you right now. So prehistoric sounding, sounds like a pterodactyl. It's just really cool bird. Yeah, it has a little bit of blue on it, but a lot of gray, and you notice that white and black on the head, a long spear-like bill, great for catching fish. It has the patience of a saint. It really does, and it can just sit in that marsh for minutes or almost hours on end, just waiting until the perfect time when a fish or other aquatic organism happens to swim by, and then and it's motionless for all this time, and then when that fish comes swimming by, it strikes lightning quick with that bill, captures that the fish or other organism for a tasty meal. But yeah, like I said, we do have that rookery right by the National Wildlife Refuge, and there are dozens and dozens of nests in this rookery, and typically they're right along the river edge, up in trees. The nests themselves look very flimsy, just look like a few sticks that were thrown together. But these birds don't weigh very much, even though they stand about 3 feet tall and have a wingspan of about 6 feet. They're all legs and feathers, and so very light actually, and so they don't need to make really strong, robust nests to support the eggs and the chicks and the 2 adults. Next bird that I'd like to highlight down along the banks of the Clyde River and Seneca River is another heron species, and this is green heron, which is about a quarter of the size of a great blue heron. Another incredible angler, loves to eat fish. It will also eat other aquatic organisms. Very patient bird, can stand motionless for minutes and minutes and minutes on end, and just waiting until that perfect time, and strikes again with a long, very powerful bill. This bird does have green on it, top of its head, and green on the wings and the back. Also noticeably though is it has a good bit of maroon kind of on the sides of the head and then down to the sides of the neck. You'll notice also it has these fairly long yellow legs. When it's standing up, it's maybe a foot or so high from head to tail, a wingspan of about 2 feet or so. So much, much smaller than the great blue heron. This is also a very intelligent bird. When you get a moment, I encourage you to search YouTube for green heron fishing. Search for green heron fishing, and probably the first video that will pop up on the screen is a green heron taking a piece of bread that it got from a person that was standing nearby. The person may have been feeding the fish, or maybe it was feeding the birds. I don't know what, but the green heron took that piece of bread and then over the course of 2 minutes would selectively place that piece of bread out on the water surface and then just wait for the little fish to come up and nibble at it. And if after 10 seconds or so they got no bites, it would take that bread, green heron would place it just slightly over to the side a little bit more and then wait for the fish. It did this for about 10 minutes. Struck a couple of times with its bill, didn't successfully get a fish, but then ultimately it caught its meal. Just amazing. Birds are very intelligent. Yes, they do have bird brains, and in some cases that means they are very intelligent, and green heron is a great example of that, using tools to catch fish. Oh, I didn't play the call of that. Let me play the call of a green heron, because it's different than the great blue heron. It's that sharp, piercing squawk. There were some other birds in the background, including the crow and songbirds, but that's the call of green heron. Loud squawk. Okay, it's hard to pick my favorite bird. This is definitely up there, one of my favorites. Belted kingfisher. Again, not a common bird during this winter season. However, in April, we start to see more and more migrating back into the area after spending their winter down in the mid-Atlantic states and coastal Carolinas, and some may go down to Florida to spend the winter. They don't have to worry about ice. They've got liquid water, plenty of food, primarily fish, down to the south of us. Now, Belted kingfishers exhibit this unique biological term that we call reverse sexual dimorphism. So sexual dimorphism reference to the fact that the male of a species looks different than the female. Now, in almost all of our upstate New York birds, the male is going to have more color than the female. Think of northern cardinal, for example. They both have color, male being bright red, female being slightly red, more of a brownish red. Okay, so not as bright, but he's got more color. It's the exact opposite with belted kingfisher, so reverse sexual dimorphism. The female, I'm going to use my pointer again. There you go. The female on the left has more color than the male on the right. They both have kind of the punk rocker spiked hairdo, feathers do, right, on top of the head. They look pretty much the same in terms of head plumage, wing plumage. They both have that grayish blue neck band or belt right there. But the female has got extra brown belt here and brown on the flanks or the sides of her torso. Males do not have that. There's some debate in the scientific community about why this is. What is this? Well, it's likely the fact that she's going to do more of the egg protecting. She's going to be in the nest more. So to blend in with the nest, blend in with the eggs, get less visible to potential predators, she's got some extra brown. The other thought is that males are very territorial, and males are more likely to stay on their breeding grounds, even during the winter months. They may not fly south for the winter. So they're going to stay around and they're going to protect and defend their territory. And so to help the males identify females as they come back into the region, the females have some brown. So the males are looking for, yes, males, keep them out of the territory, but when they see a belted kingfisher with brown coming towards them, probably going to be very welcoming to that female, at the same time trying to keep that white-chested male out of his territory. So interesting, very fascinating bird, and a cool bird, and they do completely submerge themselves down into the water to catch fish, and they have a really unique rattling call that I'm going to play for you now. Okay. They're not here in the complex yet, but they will be very soon, probably late March, maybe into early April. The Osprey will return to the Montezuma Wetlands complex and throughout New York State. Osprey is a incredibly proficient hunter, and they are a bird of prey. So a wingspan of about 5 feet. They are kind of a white and black feathered bird. Incredible eyesight, great eyesight with those yellow eyes, sharp, powerful bill, sharp talons you can see there. They have a unique way of hunting. They will soar over a wetland or a river or a lake for minutes and minutes on end, looking down for a fish that's only maybe a foot or maybe 2 feet below the surface of the water. When they see a fish fairly close to the surface of the water, they will stop soaring and start this hovering motion with their wings like this, allowing that bird to look straight down without moving anymore and just in place, hover, 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 wait and see what that fish does. And if that fish is in position for the osprey to catch it, it will stop this flapping motion and then bring the wings in to the side of the body. Now, if you're familiar with figure skating, you know how the figure skaters, when they start twirling around, they start with their arms out and then they bring their arms inward. And as they're spinning, that wrapping motion gets them going faster and faster and faster. Well, kind of same thing here. They're not twisting though, but bringing the wings in will help that bird gain speed, and they will hit the water with their talons first. So eyes down, with talons actually leading the way to catch that fish and completely submerge down into the water to grab that fish, catch it with the talons, hoist it up out of the water, and then bring it up to a tree or maybe along the banks of the river or lake to have that tasty meal. These birds will nest on utility poles, cell towers, in trees as well. They make their nests out of sticks and twigs and branches, and they sound like this. All right, that was Osprey. Now I want to get into some waterfowl here. So these are a couple of species of waterfowl that we have right now within the Montezuma Wetlands complex. The trumpeter swan and the tundra swan. Trumpeter swan on the left there, tundra swan lower right. Trumpeter swan is a year-round species for us. It's actually native to western North America and was brought over or introduced here into the eastern part of this country back in the early 1900s, when biologists were trying to restore the waterfowl and specifically the swan populations. Many of our bird species were decimated. They were over-harvested. Habitat loss caused population to decline. DDT pesticide caused a lot of problems for many of our bird species, and as a result, the populations declined. So we had to act, and in some cases we brought birds from other parts of this country to the eastern part of the country. Bald eagles were brought here in New York State in the 1970s. Trumpeter swans brought here to the eastern part of this country early 1900s. So they're not invasive. They don't take over habitat. They're not aggressive like the mute swan, which is a non-native invasive species from Eurasia. But I'm highlighting the two native species that we have here. So trumpeter swan, huge wingspan, about an 8 to 9 foot wingspan, almost entirely white except for that black bill there. And that black bill is straight off the forehead. The tundra swan is here now, but won't be here for very much longer. It's going to be traveling north to, guess where? The tundra. So they're going up to the Hudson Bay area, 1,500 miles to the north of us. Some are going to go up to northern Alaska and northern Canada, or the shores of Greenland, 2,000 to 2,500 miles north of us. That's where they breed. Their bill is slightly curved, just a slight curvature, and then sometimes they have that yellow right at the base of the bill. Not always. It's complicating. So you really have to look at the shape of the bill to differentiate trumpeter swan from tundra swan. Size-wise, tundra swan just a little bit narrower wingspan, more like a 7-foot wingspan compared to trumpeter swan's 8-foot wingspan. So I'm going to play both calls for you now. First, the trumpeter swan, which, guess what, sounds like a trumpet. We don't have a lot of these birds around. There are small family groups around, and I haven't seen any groups larger than maybe family groups of 4 to 6. So it might be last year's young sticking around with the parents a little bit longer. And then a couple of family groups might get together during that late summer, early fall season, stick around together. And so you might end up with flocks of maybe 12 or so. Or if multiple groups get together, you might end up with 20 in a flock. Now, if you see large groups of swans, and you're not really sure which ones they are, but like hundreds or thousands of swans in a flock, then that's probably the tundra swan, because they will flock up in significant numbers, and their song is like this. So, subtle difference there between the two species. All right. Now, speaking of birds that really never left for the winter, snow geese. Snow geese are still around. We're still seeing flocks of a few hundred. I estimated a couple of thousand in a flock recently at the Montezuma Audubon Center flying overhead. Just so mild. Snow never really came. The agricultural fields never were covered in snow. Ice really didn't materialize on our bodies of water like the rivers. The north end of Cayuga Lake certainly never froze over, so there's ample food and shelter habitat for these birds. We now see flocks of 600,000 to 800,000 snow geese. Typically it's in March. Now, I have a feeling that it might get going a little bit sooner this year than normal because it's been so mild. When we get more sustained south winds blowing, so it's going to be a south wind the next couple of days, maybe even for the next week, but I don't think it's going to get the big flock of birds leaving the Chesapeake Bay and Delaware Bay. I still think it might be towards the end of this month into early March when we get those milder winds blowing consistently, and the snow geese and other waterfowl are going to ride those winds northward out of the Chesapeake Bay and come on up to Montezuma. And they're going to be with us for about 2 weeks. So when they're here with us, and we will try to get the word out across all of our social media platforms, we'll get it on the website. Check out eBird. eBird is a great way to find out where birds are anywhere on the planet now. So you can search ebird.org is the website. There's an app for that. You can download it to your phone and find out when this, and of course you can call us at the Audubon Center and we'll tell you when the snow geese have arrived, or if they are here. And so when we have snow geese, they make a lot of noise. It's a cacophony of sound. They're just passing through. They're spending about 2 weeks with us. Next stop is kind of the boreal forest of Canada, the lower Hudson Bay area. They're going to stop there for a while and then go on up along the shores of Hudson Bay, going northward, and then they go up towards the Arctic tundra for breeding as well. Again, that's about 1,500 miles to 2,000 miles north of upstate New York. Species that I'm really fond of, the mallard. And people think, oh, Chris, mallard, they're everywhere. Well, they do utilize a lot of different habitats, but the population of the mallard is what's concerning to me and to my Audubon colleagues there. Here in the northeastern United States, our breeding mallard population is not doing well, and we're still trying to fully understand what is going on. Why are they not successfully breeding? So we have a banding program right now where this time of year, we band mallard ducks so we can follow their movements over the course of the breeding season, during migration, where are they spending the winters, to help us understand what is going on with the declining mallard population. Gorgeous bird. I think the males with that bright green iridescent head and yellow bill. The females here in the foreground, more of a drabbish brown in color, with a bill that is more orangey and black. And funny, I don't have a song for the mallard duck. How funny is that? But the quacking of the mallard, the quack, 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 quack. Well, and that's actually the female that makes the quacking sound. It's not the male. The male makes more of a murmuring murmur, murmur type sound. That's Mallard Duck. Here's a cool bird. Looks like a duck, but it's not a duck. It's Piedbilled Grebe. This is what we call a secretive marsh bird. We call it that because you're more likely to hear this bird than see it. It's shaped like a really small duck, maybe a foot or so in length from head to tail. And it's not a duck because it doesn't have duck feet. Notice it doesn't have webbed feet. It has large toes on its feet, but they're not webbed. And they're like Velcro pads here. So that helps them to take off when they want to fly, but also helps them walk on the wet vegetation and the mud in a marsh habitat. This is a threatened species in New York. There aren't too many places where you can find them breeding right now. They're going to return to the Montezuma Wetlands complex as we get closer to the end of March and into early April. They have a really cool kind of haunting song. Couple frogs in the background there too for the ambiance. They got a pretty substantial bill, great for cracking open crustaceans and other larger aquatic organisms in that marsh habitat. And they will dive down into the water to catch their food. They're pretty excellent swimmers. They can stay down in the water for 10, 20, 30 seconds looking for food. A couple of songbirds from the marsh and river corridors. A very familiar harbinger of spring is the red-winged blackbird. We had one red-winged blackbird hang out around our black oil sunflower seed feeders at Montezuma Audubon Center in January, and we've continued to see it now that we've gotten into February. Most of the red-winged blackbirds fly down in the mid-Atlantic states, spend the winter down south in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia areas. The males, dark jet black in color for the most part, but they do have that red-orange wing patch, which is displaying. It's a displaying tactic, noting, or it's telling other male red-winged blackbirds, "Hey, look at me. I'm tough. I'm big. You do not want to mess with this. Stay out of my territory." It also is showing off for females, telling her, "Hey, how you doing?" Trying to attract her over for breeding. So I like to think of their song as Okalee, Okalee. Some people say Conquelerie, kind of a French accent there. Okalee, tomato, tomato. We all have our way of saying things. That's fine. But that's red-winged blackbird there. And so another songbird here. This is actually a warbler species. It's called the common yellow throat. A lot of our warbler species we're searching up in the trees, but for this warbler species, we're actually going to be looking at eye level and maybe even down in the vegetation. The male has that black mask over its eyes with a little bit of white on top of that. Both the male, female of the species have that yellow throat, and they're going to be in marsh habitats, mostly eating insects. Which is why we don't see them during the winter months, and they don't show up again here until April when we have warmed up sufficiently and insect populations have increased. So here is the witchity, 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 witch song of common yellowthroat. Yep, so this is going to be our last species while we're in the boats, kayaking around here together through the marshes and our lake systems at Montezuma. One of our fairly new species at Montezuma, the Sandhill Crane. Yes, they are found at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. We have roughly 7 pair that breed now within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. They started to arrive in Montezuma in 1999. The first sandhill cranes were seen during the fall migration. They were heading from probably Ontario, Canada, maybe out towards the plains of Canada, and for whatever reason, these few birds took a more easterly track as they were heading south towards the Mid-Atlantic and Florida for the winter. And then 4 years later, 2003, the first pair was confirmed to nest at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, and they've nested every year, and now there's more sandhill cranes, again, about 7 pair that now breed at Montezuma. The best time to visit and to see sandhill cranes is actually in October and November, when we have flocks of 200 to 300. This year we had 360 sandhill cranes in one flock, and that is a record number for us. So they're not just a Florida bird, they are mostly a central plains and central and southern Canada bird, but now we have this growing population of sandhill cranes along the Atlantic flyway from Quebec and Ontario and Canada through New York State. Montezuma has the breeding population. They breed over at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge out by Batavia, New York as well. And they trumpet as well, and that sounds like this. All right, so now we're going to take a stroll. We're going to hop out of the kayaks a little bit here, stretch our legs a little bit, and go walk through some grassland habitats. We got some beautiful wildflowers like this coreopsis. We've got some native grasses. We've got purple coneflower, bee balm or wild bergamot out there, black-eyed Susan, so many other native species of grasses and wildflowers. And first bird that I'd like to introduce you to, a bird that we can find all year long. Yes, even during this time of year at Montezuma, the eastern bluebird, our state bird here in New York. And the reason why we have them during the winter months is there is an ample amount of food for them. Birds won't die because it's too cold. Birds die because there isn't enough liquid water. There isn't enough food for them. These eastern bluebirds are going to eat mostly berries, and if you've got a habitat, grassland habitat with berries, so maybe the edges of the grassland habitat are filled with berries, well, you could definitely see them in that area. And of course, they love to nest in grassland habitat. So we've got 4 sets of eastern bluebird boxes at Montezuma Audubon Center. The others are scattered around the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. So population that was in decline mid-1900s, no longer in decline. Actually a thriving species, the eastern bluebird. It sounds like this. Out walking my dog this morning here in Seneca Falls and was serenaded by eastern bluebirds and a whole host of other year-round residents here. Cardinal was singing, tufted titmice were singing, white-breasted nuthatch, black-capped chickadees, the woodpeckers were starting to drum actually, which is territorial sound. That was a good sound as well. Another species of grassland habitats, field sparrow. This is not a common sparrow species, and you might think of sparrows as all looking the same. Well, they're all generally kind of a brownish, tannish, streaky plumage, but the field sparrow has a couple of unique features. They do have a couple of white wing bars, stripes of wing color on their wings. We call them wing bars. Notice the side of the head or the cheek color here is gray, kind of a tannish colored bill. The chest is not streaked at all, and notice it doesn't have any spots on it either. So a nice clean, what we say clean chest there. And So they love to eat insects. Again, probably not going to see them during the winter months, coming back soon. And when they do, you're going to be hearing this song. It's kind of like taking a ping pong ball, dropping it on a ping pong table, and with your hand pushing down on that ping pong ball as it keeps bopping up, and it gets faster and faster, like a ping pong ball getting compressed there on the table, getting faster and faster, faster. There are some owl species that you can find around grassland habitats. Snowy owl is one, but you can also find short-eared owl. That's a highlight on the screen right now. Short-eared owls are generally only here in New York State during the winter months. They breed up in grassland habitats and tundra habitat up in northern Canada, but because it's generally so covered in snow and really difficult to find food, small mammals up there in the Arctic regions, they migrate south to slightly less snowy areas like upstate New York. There are some areas over by Geneva, out by Avon. We have them in Montezuma Wetlands Complex where they're regularly seen. Now, these are not nocturnal creatures. You don't have to stay up until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to hear and possibly even see these birds. Actually, the best time to see these birds is about an hour or so before sunset to an hour or so after sunrise in the morning. So we call them crepuscular. They're more active right around sunset and sunrise. They've got a pretty substantial wingspan, about 3-foot wingspan, excellent hunters, silent hunters. They use their excellent hearing and eyesight to look for small mammals in these grassland habitats. I've got a couple of different calls for you. First, I'm going to play the call that they make while they're down here on wintering grounds. It sounds like a chihuahua barking. Now, they do hoot, like most owls hoot, but we don't hear that hooting sound because they don't breed here. They breed up in the Arctic. So I just want to play that hooting sound for you right now. Short-eared owl. Actually, a New York State endangered species. Can't go to see these birds in too many places in New York, but Montezuma is one of them. I got a couple of swallow species I want to introduce you to. First, the largest of our swallows, the purple martin. This is a bird that goes down to the Argentina area for the winter. That's a good 4,000 miles to the south of us. Now, this bird is only about 4 or 5 inches long, and that is an incredible journey. They almost double their weight, so really packing on the ounces, eating a lot of insects to make this incredible journey from Argentina all the way up to upstate New York for the breeding season. And they have a unique song like this. You can attract purple martins to your grassland habitat if you put up boxes. These are 2 boxes that are friends of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex purchased for Montezuma Audubon Center. Each compartment has 20 housing units. You'll notice that the bottom units are gourd shaped. That's intentional because the indigenous people of New York State discovered that if you put hollowed out gourds up around structures, homes, in villages, that the purple martins are going to come in and nest in those gourds, and purple martins like to eat large stinging insects. So if you're not a fan of wasps and bees and yellow jackets, then you probably want to welcome purple martins into your world. And so every year, all of these housing units are filled with purple martin nests. Each unit has 5, 6, or maybe 7 purple martin chicks in it. And every year we successfully fledge 150 to 175 purple martin chicks every year. It's just a really cool bird. And we have volunteers that monitor the housing units to document the number of eggs, the success rate, and how many birds actually fledge or leave the nest. A couple others here, the tree swallow, which is another cavity nesting bird. And if you have eastern bluebird boxes out in your yard with wide open habitats, you really aren't going to get this bird if you have any trees in your backyard. But if you got wide open, even lawn space, maybe hopefully with a little bit of native vegetation growing up, some wildflowers and native grasses, you're probably going to have tree swallows swooping down, grabbing some smaller insects, so mosquitoes and flies and other smaller insects. The male is iridescent blue-green color with a very bright white throat and chest. The female on the right there has more of a brownish blue color, but white throat, white chest. And their song is like this. Very chatty, the tree swallow, as is the barn swallow. One last species of our grassland. I can't highlight all of them. We have dozens and dozens of species, just giving you a little bit of a snapshot here into the grassland world. So barn swallow here, same body type, relatively a small bird, just a few inches or so long, fairly long wings for the size, and really bright blue head and wings, but more of a tawny brown or orange over most of the face, the upper chest, and the belly area. This bird is unique because it makes its nest using mud that it can get from nearby marsh habitats or river corridors. It picks up that mud and then spits it out, and it builds its mud nests underneath protected areas. So underneath bridges, if you've got eaves coming off of your house and light fixtures up there under those protected areas, the barn swallows might make their nests on top of those lights. Or sometimes they'll even just make their mud nests right on the side of a building. And we've seen all that at the Audubon Center, which is kind of neat to see them so close. And people can just look out our windows and see the mud nests and the adults bringing insects to feed the chicks. But here's the song of the barn swallow. All right. So now we're going to wander now into some forested habitats, and I've got some colorful songbirds I want to introduce you to. So Rose-breasted Grosbeak here, a cousin to the northern cardinal. And you notice that bill, that might look familiar to you. It's very much the same shape and size as a northern cardinal. A lot of black and white on this beautiful bird that spends most of its winter down in central, maybe northern South America. A rose chest or breast area right up on top, and be listening and looking high up in the canopy for the rose-breasted grosbeak as we get into May and June, when the birds migrate back into the area, and listen for the sweet song, almost like a robin, it's like a really sweet robin song, like a robin that is taking singing lessons. Same cadence as a robin, just it's a robin that's taken some singing lessons, I think. There was also that metallic chip note that you may have noticed before it got into that robin-like melodious tune, another distinguishing song of or note of the rose-breasted grosbeak. Next, Baltimore Oriole here, again, way up high in the tree, and they're going to be making their nests out of very fine fibrous materials. They even use spider webs to make their nest, and their nest is not going to sit perched on top of a branch. It's actually going to dangle down from a branch, and they are masterful craftsmen. They can create a very strong nest to support multiple eggs and chicks in that nest. They will come to oranges if you cut them and put them out in your backyard or by your feeders. They will go after grape jelly, and they will also come to see some ruby-throated hummingbird nectar feeders as well. So anything orange or brightly colored, you might get the Baltimore Oriole coming to your backyard. And listen for this song, beautiful, another melodious song. And as we continue to walk through the forest at Montezuma Audubon Center, we're next encountering another warbler species. This is yellow warbler. Both male and female are mostly yellow from head to tail. These, like most warblers, are only about 4 or so inches long. The males have this streaky chest that you see here, kind of a brownish streaky. Females don't have that streaky plumage on their chest, but they both have that black eye that really stands out in contrast to the yellow plumage, and a short black bill, great for catching insects in a forested ecosystem. Again, we're going to be seeing these birds in May and June, returning to upstate New York and listening for the sweet, 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 sweeter than sweet. Some people hear sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. See here. One last one of the forest before we get back into our boats to finish up the tour here tonight. The wood thrush. Now, almost all of these species so far in the forest have been, fairly up high in the trees. But this one, again, you're looking at eye level and maybe even down on this bird. It likes to forage for insects on the ground in the forest. It's a thrush species, so it's related to the American robin species, and mostly brown up on top of the head with the brown wings. Notice that chest. Look at how it's white background with a lot of black dots on it. A bold eye ring, a white eye ring there. And I like to think this bird is the flute player of the forest. The flute player. We're going to hop back into our boats to wrap up this tour. I've got just a couple of more species I'd like to introduce you to. First, as we're going through the swamp, we are rapidly approaching a large nest made out of sticks and twigs and branches. That nest is about 3 feet in diameter. It's about 3 feet deep, weighs hundreds of pounds. That can only be the bald eagle. We have 15 bald eagle nests now across this Montezuma Wetlands complex, and well over 400 bald eagle nests across the state of New York. And that's up from just one nest that was back in 1976. We had almost lost all of our bald eagles, not only here in New York, but across this entire country. Fortunately, we started to conserve habitat. We banned DDT pesticide, made it illegal to harvest these birds for their feathers, and as a result, population has increased dramatically, and they're pretty much a daily sight for us here in Montezuma, and really near any body of water within New York State. Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, the Erie Canal, the Finger Lakes, the Hudson, Adirondacks, Long Island, Catskill Mountains. We've got bald eagles everywhere now. And they have a unique, almost like a timid type song. It's not the robust red-tailed hawk call. It's more of a timid song. Great at catching fish, just like the osprey. Now the bald eagle though will just dip their talons into the water. They don't submerge like the osprey does. They'll just get whatever they can from the surface of the water. So they're only catching fish that might be a few inches down under the surface of the water. Bring that fish up to a nest to feed chicks, or bring it up to a branch somewhere and have a meal for itself. Bald eagles nest fairly early in the year. We would expect that by the end of this month that the bald eagle pairs will have mated already, and it could be as early March that we have eggs in the nest, so that by late March, early April, we actually have chicks in the nest. Very exciting times. Another species that's really unique to Montezuma is this prothonotary warbler. This is a cavity nesting warbler species, more common down in the swamps of Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky area. We are pretty much at the northernmost extent of its range here in the Montezuma Wetlands complex. So around our swamp habitats, we have an abundant number of trees. A lot of these trees have holes in them, or cavities we call them, that woodpeckers have carved out. Perfect habitat for the prothonotary warbler. Notice bright yellow from head down through the neck and the chest and the belly area, but those wings are more of a dark gray, almost black color. They sing a sweet, 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 sweet song. There's only like 3 spots in the whole wetlands complex you can find this bird. One is on Armitage Road, just north of the National Wildlife Refuge and just south of the Audubon Center, so pretty much right in the heart of Montezuma Wetlands Complex. The Clyde River, if you go for a paddle, go in the Clyde River, you can find them there. And if you paddle again on the Seneca River on the north side of Howland's Island in Savannah, you can find them there as well. A couple more species here. Cerulean Warbler. This is a bird that winters in the Andes Mountains of South America. So this is like northern Chile and Peru, a good 3,000 miles south of where we are today. And these birds are nesting. They're going to nest way up high in the trees. They eat insects. The males, this is the male here, the cerulean blue color with that unique necktie across the neck. Female doesn't have that necktie and is more of a greenish blue color on the head and the back. And listen for the bzz, 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 ascending trill of Cerulean Warbler. This is a species of concern in New York State. If we continue to lose this population, then next step would be it goes on to the New York State threatened species list. We're not there yet. Hopefully we don't get there. The best spot to see ceruleans anywhere in the state of New York is the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. But you can also find them in the upland forested areas of the southern Finger Lakes region. Letchworth State Park is a good spot to see them. Out towards Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge as well. Another thrush species. So just 2 more species here for you. The thrush that I'm talking about is the veery. And this is a really cool bird. It's an insect eater and typically a ground nester, kind of a brownish, streaky. It almost sounds like a flute player as well, kind of like that wood thrush, but just slightly different. Great. And then wrapping up our paddle here as the sun begins to set on us here, the wood duck. Yes, a duck species that is a cavity nester. So swamp habitats is a great spot to see them. The male is brightly colored, just has about every color of the rainbow on it there, you can see on the right. The female is more brownish in color, does have that blue speculum or wing patches, colored wing patches there. Also has a white teardrop shape over the eye. I've got a call of both the male and the female here for you. First, I'm going to play the female. And contrast that with the male wood duck. I think we scared it. Must have got too close with the boats. Yeah, cool bird, mostly plant eater. It will eat acorns. So if you got some swamp white oak there adjacent to swampy habitat there, a water-filled habitat, you probably get, and those trees have cavities in them, you're probably going to have wood ducks hanging around there. It's been such a mild winter. We've had wood ducks within the Finger Lakes region, mostly down at the south end of Cayuga Lake. They typically go down to the Gulf Coast states for the winter, but didn't have to fly that far because it was so mild and ample food for them here. It didn't really ice over at all. So really cool duck species. Well, that brings us towards the end of our excursion here today. So as the sun begins to set on our time together here, I want to thank you for joining me for this virtual excursion through the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Hopefully I encouraged you and inspired you to come out and visit us at the Montezuma Audubon Center. We are the hub for all the activities, recreational, educational, volunteer opportunities, and science and conservation that takes place across the entire Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Again, we're open year-round, Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. There are 300 different species of birds that can be found at Montezuma, so clearly I couldn't show you all of them. But if you're looking for an opportunity to get out of the house, try something different, go see something new, I encourage you to come by the Audubon Center in March. Come visit us. We'll have a lot for you to see right at our facility. We've got a lot of indoor space. We've got exhibits inside. We sit on 200 acres. We have 2 miles of trails. After you're done exploring our property, we can direct you to other areas within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex to see a good number of birds, other wildlife as well. So keep us in mind when you're looking for opportunities to get out, whether it's this coming spring migration season, you're looking to go for paddling opportunities. We're going to do a lot of canoeing and kayaking coming up as we go into May and throughout the summer months. We do a lot of educational programs for families and school children and scouts and homeschool. We do habitat restoration projects like removing invasive plant species and also lead a lot of guided walks. Snowshoeing in the winter, guided walks in spring and fall seasons. So again, thank you very much for joining me this evening. If you're looking to get in touch here, a couple ways to contact me. If you have questions about birds or conservation or this Montezuma area, there's my email address or phone number at the Audubon Center. Our website, montezuma.audubon.org. Again, that's montezuma.audubon.org. You click on our programs and events button, you'll see all the upcoming events. We are going to be adding many more events as we go through the spring season. You can also keep up with us on Facebook and Instagram. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for a wonderful boat ride and walk. We are lucky to have so many beautiful birds right near us at Montezuma. So I thank you again for sharing them with us, and I look forward to hopefully getting over there to see them in person very soon. So now we will take any questions anybody has. So we have one here. Do you know the wingspan of the Sandhill Crane?
Oh, good question. Sandhill Crane's about a 5 foot wingspan. It's got very much the same body length and shape as the great blue heron. However, the Sandhill Crane flies differently. Sandhill Crane keeps its neck straight out and the legs are straight out. Again, 5 foot wingspan. The great blue heron, same length, however, it bends its neck typically kind of like in an S shape. Legs still stick out from the back of the body. Yeah, good question.
Great. And then any loons in the area, and then a little bit more about migration of bald eagles.
Okay, so loons. Loons can be found at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex during migration. Not a large number, but occasionally they will stop in our marsh habitats and open water areas like lakes and rivers. They don't breed with us. They will go up to the Adirondacks. They'll go up into the boreal forest of Quebec and Ontario for breeding. And then a question about migration. You said the bald
Of bald
eagle?
eagles. Yep.
Eagle migration. So migration of bald eagles, it's not like the migration you might think of for Cerulean Warbler, for example, thousands of miles. The bald eagle migration is more of a dispersal. So it might be 100 miles or it might be a couple 100 miles. The adult breeding bald eagles will not leave their territory. So Montezuma's bald eagle adults pretty much stay here. They may have to wander a few miles to find open water and fish, but they're not going to leave entirely. Juvenile birds, though, they will wander, 100 miles down to the south and then come back north. And it takes 5 years for bald eagles to reach full maturity. And once they're fully mature birds, they have the white head and the white tail. They're ready to pair up with another adult, make a nest together, and breed. So we see both adult and juvenile bald eagles at Montezuma all year round. We had our midwinter bald eagle survey just about a month ago, and we counted 72 bald eagles at Montezuma.
Great. Somebody says they have bluebirds, a 3 pair, and have been feeding with dried mealworms. Do you have any other suggestions?
That's a great way to attract bluebirds to your backyard, putting out mealworms. Yes, bluebirds will not eat black owl sunflower seed or thistle seed that you might use to attract black-capped chickadees, northern cardinals, white-breasted nuthatch, tufted titmice, and others. Another thing you can do is plant native vegetation. And I talked about this a little bit on my presentation last week. There are a great variety of shrubs that produce berries that eastern bluebirds will eat. I'm thinking of black chokeberry. There's also a red chokeberry, spice bush, winterberry is another one. So if a person who asked that, or really anyone, is interested more in the shrubs and other plants that you can plant in your yard, in your community, on your balcony to attract birds into your world, check out our Plants for Birds program at Audubon. So it's audubon.org/plants for birds, or you can just search Audubon Plants for Birds in your favorite search engine, and that'll pop up. And that database that will pop up, you can type in shrubs, and a whole list of shrubs will pop up. If you are interested more in trees to plant that will attract Cerulean Warbler or Rose-breasted Grosbeak, you can get that information. And if you're interested more in low growing plants like wildflowers and native grasses, had a question last week about ground cover, and I thought of another one that I didn't mention that last week, but green and gold is another excellent native plant that is beautiful. It only needs like partial sun, and it has a beautiful green foliage with nice yellow flowers, and it spreads so it will uh, cover up any bit of exposed soil. It's non-invasive, so it's much better than English ivy and um, kudzu and other spreading invasive plant species.
Great. I think our last question is actually just a comment, but somebody said they have snow geese. They had a snow geese sighting this morning in Fairville, New York, which is about 45 minutes west of Montezuma, and they enjoyed your talk.
Well, thank you. Yes, I was out walking my dog before coming on here this evening, and I heard snow geese in the air. There were smaller flocks of a few hundred coming through. I did a quick search of eBird and discovered that the largest snow goose flocks are still down in the Chesapeake Bay and Delaware Bay. They might start to work their way northward as we go through this week because it's going to be so mild and south winds are going to blow. But I still think the big flocks of snow geese, 500,000 to more, are still a couple of weeks away. And again, like I said, we're going to let everyone know through a variety of platforms, social media. We do a lot of radio interviews. I'm on the fingerlakes1.com podcast. You can check me out there as well. And I update the Finger Lakes community and everyone about the birds that we're seeing at Montezuma and where people can go to see them.
Great, and that was our last question. So thank you everybody for coming. Chris, thank you so much for sharing Montezuma with us.
My pleasure.
We love all of your presentations and we really appreciate you being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Hope to see everyone at Montezuma Audubon Center very soon. Take care. Good night.